So as it is always the case, Donald Trump was once again mocked and ridiculed and blamed for everything that occurred yesterday during that eclipse. People pointing out the last time eclipse occurred that he looked up into it. But you see, that's not the story, because what Donald J. Trump just did, what he said would happen during the eclipse happened, and it's continuing today. Do you know what that is? Because it's the story I'm going to bring you here today. All right, my friends, welcome back to the broadcast. Can't thank you enough for being here. For each and every one of you who took our advice when I was over at Lisa Haven's channel and joined us here, and then went to restrictedrepublic.com as I requested firmly. And there's a reason I'm trying to get this across to everyone. If you want your news the way you deserve it, unfiltered, uncensored, you have to get to restrictedrepublic.com. There's no time to wait. The lights can go out at any second on anyone whose voices they disagree with. Right now, use discount code RR39, annual checkout, $39 a year, and I'm going to give you that rate each year for 3 years plus 14 days for free. So many thousands have joined us over there because they know that we're beholden to no one but our audience. No commercials, no interruptions. That is restrictedrepublic.com, the news in the format you deserve. But now let's get back to this broadcast. So what was Donald Trump so right about? I'm going to give you some hints until we get to the very end of this broadcast. First, listen in here to one of my least favorite people. Well, actually, there's nobody in the administration who right now I respect at all because of statements specifically like this.
The United States will pursue a healthy economic relationship with China. We will seek to cooperate with China on global challenges, and we will deploy our economic tools when needed and in a narrowly targeted manner.
Because she and Biden implicitly and firmly reject the idea that the United States should decouple from China. Now, many administrations haven't decoupled from China, but they should be put in check. Can you decouple in today's environment? I'd love to say you could. But right now, with the push towards all these electric vehicles and China controlling every element that goes into it, it's kind of difficult. And our grid is now so greatly compromised. Without them, well, the United States just wouldn't look the same. And I'm not saying that that should be the case, because it shouldn't. It should never have been allowed in the beginning. But you see, this is what's occurring, what's happening. Of course, she is the one who bowed also during this meeting with the Chinese vice premier, as she bowed to him. But that is the level of respect the administration has continued to show China. But you see, that's not the only thing that the administration is doing wrong. And why Trump's gaining so much power. And it's not only one side of the aisle that's doing things wrong, it's both sides. This story covers both. The CIA seeks to expand surveillance. With all the mass abuses we have documented, they want to expand surveillance, and they're saying it's in the eyes, and it's to combat fentanyl. Now, they have done this before. This was after 9/11 when all these surveillance powers came into place, and there was a movement to get them taken away. Jim Jordan speaks slightly.
It's why we need a warrant. We can put all the reforms in there, and I'm for all the reforms, but in the end, the real check is to have a separate and equal branch of government weigh in on the process and not just have the FBI, which we know time after time, Black Lives Matter protesters, they were searching. People who were at the Capitol on January 6th, they were searching.
In other words, there should be no unchecked power, but this surveillance power is fairly unchecked, and many within the House and even the Senate have tried to push back. But who's going to defeat this measure? I'll show you in a second. Rich Grinnell came out, reauthorized. By the way, this is all over the last 24 hours or so. I just want you to get a perspective of how quickly things are eroding till we get to why Trump was so right with what occurred yesterday. And it's going to continue on. Reauthorizing 702 in this current form is pathetically weak, Grinnell stated. It hasn't been reformed. It was used by Democrats to spy on their political opponent, Donald J. Trump. You don't get to say you are concerned about Washington's overreach and weaponization of the courts if you vote for this current reauthorization. It's better to end it then reauthorize it. And don't pretend, these states, that we're dealing with it to stop terrorists, because the southern border is wide open and terrorists have been pouring in for years. Not many of us would disagree with that whatsoever. Representative Eli Crane: if the swamp is given an inch of ground when it comes to our liberties, it's never long before they take a mile. A clean reauthorization of FISA 702 is a blatant violation of the Fourth Amendment and should be voted down. It should be. It's a massive abuse of our rights. It's been proven time and time again. Why there's a discussion goes to show you exactly how the fabric of our government is eroding overall. Thomas Massey comes out: the U.S. government uses the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to spy on Americans without a warrant. This week, the House will vote to require the feds to get a warrant to snoop on Americans. But guess who is rumored to be fighting against it? I know those Democrats have kept us alive for so long, but not a Democrat, folks. Conservatives enraged by Speaker Johnson's move to scuttle key spy power reforms. Another horrible decision by Mike Johnson, but it goes to speak to the overall problem and trouble with our current government institutions. They should be only representing we the people and our rights and our future and our prosperity. But you tell me anywhere in these stories where any of that is being preserved and or protected. A deal with China? A deal to surveil people without warrants further? No matter how much the calls are to reform 702. But remember, we're all to blame, right? White men are the biggest terror threat in this country, Don Lemon stated. You see, because there's not enough divide already with our government officials, media continues to have to, add to it. Except when the shoe's on the other foot, I guess it's okay. Because he just got married. And as you'd see, the man he got married to, he called the biggest terror threat to this country. But you see, that's the out-and-out hypocrisy that we're watching and weeding through, not only with the politicians you see in this picture, but the media personalities also. It's a great talking point for them. A propaganda that builds hate should never be stated, but, they're fine. They'll just move slightly to the right leading into the election and then staunchly back to the left immediately after they're elected. The Biden administration is doing so much right now to tear down, again, not only the fabric of government, the fabric of society. The newest movement, if you've heard, and I'm sure you have, is the movement towards electric vehicles. But can we live up to the standard? The EPA emission standards defy reality, and I hope you've read that. I want you to read this article. I leave all my links at restrictedrepublic.com. Jump in, look at the videos down below. You can see all the links to every single article we do, because we want you to research and have your own opinion. First, Americans bristle when they are pressured into purchasing products they haven't proven their worth over an extended period of time. We've seen this time and time again. When has the government implemented something that they said was good for us, but then later on turned out not to be so good for us? I know you can come up with one very recent example, can't you? Next, electric vehicles lose power in wintry weather, thus increasing the already existent range anxiety. Thieves are stealing the charger cables where you could go charge up because they're worth money. They wouldn't do that with diesel or fuel, would they? So rather than curtailing fossil fuel, they're throwing us into something that nobody understands yet. Just like yesterday's video, if you got to see it, if you were restricted Republic, you did. Just like weather modification, they said they would never do. But then in San Francisco, they launched the experiment of injecting sodium salt, aerosolized into the air to reflect back the sun. But they said they weren't going to do that either. It appears now they're doing a lot of things that either they don't understand. Actually, I'm going to stick with that thought process. Because most of this, they simply don't care to understand. They just govern through talking points. Not facts, not figures, because they would have studied the facts and figures behind this movement and this cutting down in emissions and these EV vehicles, and understood that there's multiple points that they have to be extremely concerned about. Even the sixth one: has the EPA thought about the pollution generated by the recycling of these large batteries, car bodies, solar panels, and wind turbines? Well, throw caution to the wind. But when you do throw caution to the wind, like Hertz did, well, you end up having to step down because the American people simply aren't consuming it anymore. They're not consuming the China narrative anymore. They're not consuming that our rights and privacy shouldn't be first and foremost, and they're not consuming electric vehicles in the consumption that the U.S. government would prefer. And again, something Trump pointed out time and time again is occurring, and it's why you're now not looking at something that I believe anymore will be a tight race. It's gotten way too far from Biden now. And when it gets too far away, and I'm going to show you all the elements as to why I state that here. He's losing in foreign policy. He's losing in domestic policy. One day, Blinken states that, of course, Ukraine will be a member of NATO, trying to pretend to be tough in a fashion that he has no propensity to do so. And just a few days later, NATO telling Ukraine, you better get ready to negotiate with Russia. How long will America allow itself to be the lacking stock of not only the international community, but its own domestic community? How many of you take this U.S. government and the administration seriously with any of the decisions they're making? They have literally eclipsed any rhyme or reason. How long will it be till people just simply say, no, we're voting you out, you're done? And it's happening. No matter what Biden tries to do this late in the game between buying votes by forgiving student loan, it simply won't be enough. He's lost his own constituency. He's lost Nancy Pelosi. I'll show you here in a second. And then he even brags and mocks the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, showing a blatant disrespect for the very institutions that our forefathers granted to us is not only disrespectful, it's a recipe for disaster in any political landscape. Joe Biden balloons temporary amnesty. Another hot button issue that really, if you didn't have mainstream media, you'd realize that the majority of Americans have no desire nor propensity to deal with any of this. His amnesty will now include 1.2 million foreign nationals. You see how everything is crumbling and eroding so quickly? All these articles over the last 24 hours. You see, the only real eclipse yesterday was the eclipsing of an entire party. The Democrats can't save their ship anymore. 1.2 million immigrants in the U.S. are either eligible for or receiving temporary protection status. And in February of 2024, we hit a new record high, 51.4 million total foreign-born or immigrant population. Are we able to sustain that? Do those show up in the facts and figures when you're looking at the economy? Do they even report crime statistics correctly? Well, by the way, the FBI doesn't. They make them up because most of the agencies they need to get those statistics from don't report to the FBI, so they're simply made up, and the mainstream media puts it out when it's good news, well, if the Democrats are in office, and puts it out if it's bad news when the Republicans are in office. So all the facts and figures you're seeing are false. Because who's counting? Not only when we're talking about foreign-born or the immigrant population, but who's counting the real crime? Who's counting the real economy? No one is. The Democrats can't even get their own candidate registered. In Ohio, Biden may very well not appear on the ballot now, at least for the primary, because they forgot the timeline. They forgot the deadline. The administration is an absolute joke. Non-compliant with state law, Joe Biden will be, and non-compliant with federal law, many of us would argue he has continued to be. And now he's losing all his support. You see, again, when Trump mocked yesterday, and I hope you saw it, of his own, well, I'll show you in a second here. He was accurate again. Joe Rogan reveals when he thinks the Democratic Party will kick Biden to the curb. Rogan gone. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gone. Now some will argue about this because of what board he sits on now with the UFC, and Dana White may not put up with him being the man he was before, so maybe he did it for business. Maybe he just learned to keep his nose out of politics like every entertainer should and stay out of the way and focus on what they do best, entertaining. Well, maybe that could go for Biden too. Next, maybe it can entertain us. fell up another flight of stairs yesterday. At least it's a good chuckle every now and then, because as far as governing and political prowess, it's non-existent. Fetterman is starting to say better things than the Biden administration. I can't believe I actually just said that out loud. 40 Democrat lawmakers, including Pelosi, urged Biden to halt arms transfer to Israel. You see, there's too many linchpin issues for Biden to overcome between immigration and Israel, war, foreign policy, domestic prosperity. What does he have? What has he done? He's forgiven student loans, which he shouldn't have. In no way, shape, or form. If you paid your student loan, should you get your money back? You see, there's no fairness anymore. There's no equity. It's just simply where you're trying to get and the results you're trying to achieve. And now, as always, the Democrats will start to shift and appear like they're more right. They do this every election cycle. Immediately after they get reelected, they go back to being as left can be. Blue state squatters put on notice with aggressive law and order bill. People are getting killed, and this was coming from a Democrat that no longer sees that squatters okay, at least for now. But you see, the world's shifting. The world's not blind to that anymore. So when the Federal Reserve says now it's going to slash rates just ahead of Election Day, you see, all the ploys are in place. The eclipse darkens the sky. The political landscape is darkening. But you got to shine the light of truth on it at all times, and you realize the levity and hilarity that exists within it all. And no, I'm not going to play Biden falling up another flight of stairs. It's just too many clips at this point in time. And I'm not going to talk about Biden defending Chinese visa exemption loop, even though he seems to do everything for a country that no one in America should ever support. But I should mention that yesterday, the UK British government, sorry about that, Foreign Office described it as standard practice for Cameron to go to meet with Trump. Cameron. Do you know why he did that? Is the writing on the wall, was this just standard? Was he trying to skip Trump's temperature on funding Ukraine further? Or does he simply know where the cards now lie? That Trump will be reelected, and in my mind there's little doubt to that anymore, barring any catastrophe, because the administration, the Biden administration, and Joe Biden himself have completely eroded into a ball of nothingness. And Trump showed it yesterday, even though people mocked this ad that he did, and I won't play it because I don't want to get copyrighted. But nonetheless, it started here, with some nice little music playing in the background, people cheering as Trump eclipsed the sun. Was a simple statement that we will save America. And he was right. It did happen as he published this right during the eclipse, because I truly believe the American people, and I just showed you a sliver of what's breaking down in this nation, that just over the last 24 hours will have Trump eclipse the current political landscape. At this point in time, people simply want change. They may disagree with the man or agree, it depends on who they are, but the change is what they're looking for. They want something to eclipse the current state of this union and change it back in the favor of we the people. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.